Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I am up and I am seeing green. The world is good. I got up early this morning and I've been fuckingly awesomely diligent in getting out my vids today. So I'm slightly proud of myself. Alright, good. Moving and shaking. Yeah, so again, new channel for the foreseeable future until either the appeal goes through or until the appeal is shot down. This is going to be the channel that I do my live streams on, and after the live stream I'll immediately transfer it over to the main channel. I like doing live streams, and so this bugs the shit out of me that I'm not on my typical channel. It even feels weird, to be honest. Like usually when I'm on my own channel, it feels like my own thing, and now this feels kind of not like my own thing. Not to mention, when YouTube gut my channel, when they killed the live stream thing, I went from having like 0 people on the live stream to up to I think almost like 200 people on the live streams. That's not a huge amount per se in comparison to somebody like Jimmy Dore, but seeing as I started from like 0, it's a big fucking deal. It took forever to get to that point. So it annoys the shit out of me that they put a knife in me during that time. But that being said, for the sake of, you know, in order to have the capacity to live stream, I'll use this channel, and hopefully people follow me over to this channel. By the way, this channel is the Progressive Soapbox, and at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, or between 5 and 6, in the same way I would do my live shows typically, I will be doing those live shows here. So again, please join me on this channel, the Progressive Soapbox. The thing I wanted to talk about today was a story that came out, and I looked at this and I read this story, and I thought to myself, the heading for this is going to be massively misleading, because the heading it sounds comically ridiculous, and I think that they were going for a certain amount of sarcasm in the heading of the title of this particular piece. But I don't necessarily know if everybody is going to know that they're being somewhat sarcastic in this. So, big splashy headline. Vice News. Bernie Sanders colluded. Not with Russia, but with Australia. More specifically, the Australian Labour Party. I shit you not. Bernie Sanders has essentially got fined for what the FEC... Who knew the FEC even existed? I didn't even know the FEC had any teeth at all, let alone going after Bernie Sanders. And there is something comically insane with going after Sanders, while Donna Brazile gives this big splashy headline talking about collusion, with that money being routed to the Clinton Foundation. I mean, I'm sorry, to Clinton campaign. How are you saying that one is not in violation of the FEC rules in regards to the amount that people can get from a particular campaign? But Bernie Sanders, no, he didn't accept money from anybody from Australia. What they convicted him of was saying that, in a nutshell, you had certain people who came from Australia to work with the Bernie Sanders campaign. The Labour Party, essentially, in Australia, paid for these kids, gave them a stipend, and apparently paid for their way around the country while they supported Bernie Sanders. Now, the FEC looked at this and said that this amounted to some form of a campaign donation, and fined Bernie Sanders, fined his campaign anyway. I think it was like $14,000. I'm going to read the story. But just so we're clear on this, because most people don't necessarily read into the article, they take the heading and they just kind of run with the title. A, Bernie Sanders never admitted to the collusion, because there was no collusion. That word is too slippery to even have any kind of real meaning in this case. And B, what the FEC is talking about is not a campaign donation. It's not people putting money in their pocket. It's not various countries stuffing money in Bernie Sanders' G-string. None of that. What they're literally talking about are students being paid by the Labour Party to assist the Sanders campaign. Sanders didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Sanders thought this was perfectly legal and on the up and up. He didn't know. They paid the fine. They didn't necessarily go through the court case, but like I said, they never admitted guilt to this because there's nothing to admit to. Our bad, we fucked up, let's move on. using the term collusion in this case as if Bernie Sanders was working in coordination with the Australian government is obscene. And yes, that is the way this is being spun in certain periodicals. If you do a search for Bernie Sanders colludes with Russia, you get a shitload of articles talking about Bernie Sanders interacting. I'm sorry, not Russia. Bernie Sanders in Australia. You get a shitload of articles talking about this particular headline or this particular article. Bernie Sanders colluded with the Australian Labour Party. And the reason why I think they're doing this, again, yes, it may reach the definition of technical collusion, I guess. If you're saying that collusion in this case specifically means that people came to help the candidate from another country. But in that case, your words just, the whole idea of words having meaning kind of goes out the window. Bernie Sanders and the Australians, there was collusion. While the Russian investigation continues to swirl around President Donald Trump and the members of his entourage, the Federal Election Commission, FEC, has confirmed another instance of illegal meddling in the election. Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign illegally accepted contributions from the Australian Labour Party, which paid for volunteers to fly across the globe to volunteer on behalf of the campaign, according to the ruling filed earlier this month. The volunteers who were participating in the government-funded education program got $8,000 in stipends from their native country to campaign for the popular Vermont senator in the 2016 run for the White House. The FEC ruled that Sanders' campaign accepted about $25,000 in-kind donations from the Australians. Bernie's been ordered to fork over $14,500 in civil penalties for violating campaign law. Sanders' campaign staffers told the FEC they knew that there was some kind of Australian volunteers were getting stipends, but they thought, mistakenly, that FEC has pointed out in their ruling that the volunteers were doing legal work. After initially pushing back against the FEC, Sanders' campaign has agreed to pay up. Come on, let's be very honest. Let's be very honest. There is a massive difference between foreign actors putting money in a candidate's pocket and foreign actors paying and bribing a candidate or colluding with a candidate to get the candidate elected. And kids coming over to help a politician that they themselves like and they themselves want to support. And I understand people saying, well, technically there was a violation of the rules, fair enough. But my issue here is with the word collusion. I understand if you want to say he technically violated the law, fair enough. But certainly there is a difference between a technicality and violating the law. Something that it makes perfect sense that the candidate says, I didn't think this was an issue because I'm not accepting money from these people. Ultimately, they've just come here to help my campaign out. And somebody saying, here's a bunch of money, go do some favor on my behalf. Words, man. These words are far too slippery. These words are far, far too slippery. During the course of the campaign, thousands and thousands of young people from every state and many countries volunteered. Among them were 7 Australian young people who were receiving modest stipend and airfare from the Australian Labour Party so they could learn about American politics, the spokesperson said. The folks on the campaign managing volunteers did not believe the stipend disqualified them from being volunteers. There's no drama here. There's no story here. You had a bunch of kids who came to help the Sanders campaign because they wanted to learn more about American politics. Sanders was not getting money from these people. Sanders didn't know that this was an issue at all. And what the FEC is using to make the case of saying you guys violated FEC rules or regulations in this is because somebody paid for them to campaign on their behalf. But this is being spun into collusion. The thing I want to call to task here, and I don't like to do whataboutisms, but whataboutisms have their issues or have their place. And I think the issue that people take with this stuff is you lose legitimacy if you're not necessarily being fair across the board in the way you go about your affairs. Now, I've been screaming about FEC violations, meaning Hillary Clinton breaking campaign finance laws, because it's so overt, it's so over the top. The story was talked about going back for months and months and months ago, even before Donna Brazile came out and said what Donna Brazile said. And I'm going to read what Donna Brazile said. She was head of the Democratic National Committee, so she would know, if anybody would know. How on earth are you creating a case against Bernie Sanders for having a bunch of kids coming over into the campaign and learning about American politics when multiple sources in the media and in the Democratic Party itself comes out saying that the money that was given to the states were being rerouted to New York, meaning the Clinton Foundation or the Clinton campaign, for all intents and purposes, completely bypassing and skating state finance laws. Now, how is the FEC taking issue with one but gives a complete pass to the other? It seems like there is a lot of justice that lifts the blindfold. This is Politico. I'm just going to read this one part because I think this one part is illustrative of the point I'm trying to get at. You're going after Sanders because there are a bunch of students who came to help out the Sanders campaign to learn about American politics. Honestly, they're not putting money in his pocket. They're not doing any of that. This has nothing to do with people paying Sanders for anything. They're using the term collusion. This has nothing to do with any type of collusion. This is not collusion. At least not collusion in the way that they use the definition when they're talking about Trump and Russia or all this other stuff. Kids assisting Bernie Sanders to learn more about American politics. What they're talking about is that this is amazing that this is an issue, but the money that the Australian government or the Labour Party gave to the students, the stipend, while they were in the process of learning more about American politics. That's what they're determining to be collusion. And that's what they've filed against the ruling against against Bernie Sanders. Now, the FEC is on its high horse about campaign finance laws and all this other stuff. Why is it not on its high horse about this? I mean, this is in the newspaper or in the mainstream magazines, in the open. This is not some, magazines in a corner of the internet somewhere, flailing in irrelevancy. This is Politico. Gary said he described the party as fully under the control of the Hillary Clinton campaign, which seemed to confirm the suspicions of the Bernie camp. The campaign had the DNC on life support, giving him money every month to meet his basic expenses, while the campaign was using the party as a fundraising clearinghouse. Under the FEC law, the same body that just fined Bernie Sanders, an individual can contribute a maximum of $2,700 directly to a presidential campaign, but the limits are much higher for contributions to state parties and national committees. Individuals who had maxed out their $2,700 contribution limit to the campaign could write an additional $353,400 $400 to the Hillary Victory Fund. That figure represented $10,000 to each of the 32 state parties who were part of the Hillary's Victory Fund agreement, $320,000 and $33,400 to the DNC. The money will be deposited in the states first and transferred to the DNC shortly after that. Money in the battleground states usually stayed in the state, but all other states funneled the money directly to the DNC, which quickly transferred the money to Brooklyn. Wait, I said. The Victory Fund was supposed to be for whoever was the nominee and the state party races. You're telling me that Hillary has been controlling it since before she won the nomination. Gary said the campaign had to do it or the party would collapse. That was the deal that Robbie Mook struck with Debbie. He explained, referring to the campaign manager, Robbie Mook. It was to sustain the DNC. We sent the party nearly $20 million from September until the convention and more to prepare for the election. Now, 1% of the money went back to the state parties. Just 1%. If 1% of the money is going back to the state parties, and the state parties is bringing in $353,000 a head, meaning somebody can donate that much money, but the candidate can only take in $2,700. If that money is being rerouted back into the even if it's going through the state parties, when that money is being routed back to the candidate herself, how on earth can the argument be made that that's not violating campaign finance laws? The candidate themselves are in charge of the political apparatus. That political apparatus is literally working for their ends, and all of the money that's being accrued by that particular political apparatus is being used by the candidate themselves, because the candidate is the one who's making the decisions on the process. if the money is being routed back, and you have the person who was head of the DNC saying this, so it's not as if you don't have any testimony about this. You have this coming out in other magazines. This is not that big of a deal, though. According to the FEC, this is not an issue. This is not a problem. This is perfectly legal and above board. But a bunch of kids helping Bernie Sanders to learn more about American politics, meaning they're learning more about American politics, that's collusion. And that requires a penalty by the FEC. That's amazing. I didn't even know the FTC was still in effect, if I'm being honest. Yes, I know technically the organization is there, but I had no clue that that was actually still doing anything. I thought it was kind of out of commission at this point. But apparently, in the mode of selective justice, they still are kicking around. And in this case, they filed or charged Bernie Sanders with colluding with the Russian, I keep wanting to say the Russian government. They've beat that into the public consciousness so much, of colluding with Australian Labour Party. Fucking ridiculous. Fucking ridiculous. God knows. Sanders threatened those kids. He said if they donated to Hillary, he'd take away their passports. I'll provide proof of this later, but for now, let's act on it. Right. Right. It's like, we'll get to the proof later on, but, you know, we need to solve some shit. That's right. He should have took the money for his non-profit in trade for political favors, apparently. Scott Castor. I'm glad I'm not the only one who sees the problem with this particular, this policy. I read this and I kept thinking to myself, but that woman was taking money from other governments through her foundation. I mean, the foundation at that point is just a fig leaf. She's taking money through other governments, and they're acting as if her taking money through other governments in no way has any impact on the candidate herself. Even though you can see in one situation after the next where money in the Clinton Foundation will get you a visit or a call from either Hillary or Bill himself. Come on, let's be honest. Let's be very honest about it. I'm just blown away by the hypocrisy on this. I mean, this feels to some degree kind of like the breathtaking Bernie Sanders being cheated by the DNC or by Democrats. And then that same Bernie Sanders who was cheated by Democrats comes out and says that Russia colluded with Donald Trump to cheat America. This stuff is breathtaking at times. It's fucking insane. Absolutely insane. All right, so I'm going to end this because I have a few more to do, and I'm going to push this up on the other site. I'm going to periodically do live videos here because I kind of want to try to pull the audience into this particular page for 5 and 6 o'clock. So they may not necessarily belong, and I'll probably do several of them just so I can get people in the habit of coming here. But yeah, this is coming up on the regular site. So thank you guys for joining me. I know this is weird being in this particular site. I feel like I've caught a criminal case in some weird way. Like somebody's been in prison for something, for some kind of political crime. And after being out of for some political crime, they get a certain amount of street cred because they were put in the clink fighting against the man. It's so bizarre, but that's the way it feels. Like this is such a bullshit reason in order to keep somebody off. Not just that, they eliminated Jerry Beck from Twitter. I have another video on that one coming up. But Jerry Beck was essentially kicked off of Twitter. He said something about the Parkland shooting, and that was all it took. So I'll end it on that. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys.